plenary is already crowded, which is a good sign for us to start. So all the people who are still having a chit-chat, we kindly ask you to sit down so we can start with our opening. You will have plenty of time in the next 2 days to discuss and get in touch with each other. So, talking about getting in touch with each other, we still have the Telegram channel for all of you who did not check in there yet. Just scan the QR code and get in touch with each other. And also try to remember to use our hashtag. It's EGP Congress. Yes, that's it. So whenever you talk about the Congress going on, have a selfie, have some important topic to tell the people about it. Let the people in the world know that we are here. And also we are here on our Flickr, so where everything is posted, all the updates and infos, so where you get informed. I kindly also remind you about our safe space policy. For all of you who didn't get through it online, please make yourself comfortable with the code of conduct so that we have a respectful and anti-harassment and discrimination space here. If anyone feels discriminated or harassed by any chance, feel free and do not hesitate to contact one of the stuff you see on these lines here. Yeah, and I think when everyone have their seats, we will start, and I will introduce myself so you know who's speaking all of the time here on stage without knowing. I think you can't read it from the back. And yeah, it's getting quiet. So, oh wow, there's a picture of me. Okay, cool. I didn't know. Yeah, that's me. Hi. Thanks. Nice to be here. That's a surprise going on here. Yeah, if we are all set and having our glass of water, bottled water, not talking about any pictures on the phone here in the back. So yeah, we could start because we're already a little late. So when I get the sign, I will find, I have got the sign. Thumbs up. So yeah, we're live now, I think. Ladies and gentlemen and gentless, welcome to the 37th Congress of the European Greens. Yeah. I feel very honored to be on stage. As seen, my name is Nadine Kobbener. I'm the person who is called the host. I'm the person who tries to remind you on the time and on the agenda we have here in the next 2 days, which is a huge agenda. I was looking online for it. I think you all know why you're here. You're going to vote on strategies and bodies and to have a good demand for the 2024 elections next year of Europe. So we turn this everything green. Yay! I'm really excited to be part of this. And yeah, I will start with getting the first person on stage, a person who knows much better than I do what you are all going to do in the next 2 days, because he is a member of the European Parliament of Austria. He's a person who fights for small-scale and ecological sustainable agriculture. He fights for better animal, climate and environmental protection, and of course for a peaceful foreign policy as well as a green EU. So everything we need on this planet actually at this time. So please welcome with me with a big round of an applause the co-chair of the
Thank you, thank you. Our Justice Minister, and she said, wow, there's such a cool energy in this room. So take this feedback. So I want to welcome all the delegates from European Green parties, all the ministers that have joined us today on stage, the Commissioner for Environment that will be here on stage afterwards at the panel, Virginijus Sinkevičius. I want to welcome all the national members of parliament, all the members of European Parliament, including our President, Terry Reintke. I also want to welcome, I don't know if he's here already, our new MEP, Nico Stefanuța from Romania, because it's a real good catch. We have a Romanian MEP since a few weeks. I want to welcome all our cooperation partners in civil society, but also our very own cooperation partner, Green European Foundation, FYG. I want to welcome all the local councillors from Central European Roundtable. I don't know how many of you are here and have been participating at Central European Roundtable, a great initiative. Monika Wanner, our MEP from Austria, is always year by year organizing this. Thanks for also joining us here at this conference. And all our guests that are here today, physically and online. Welcome to this European Congress, European Green Congress. Already now, organizing such a Congress is a huge effort. It takes a lot of work. It's even a bit stressy sometimes. So I want to thank all the staff members, including our Secretary General, Benedetta Del Mate, and Angela Stoichev from the Austrian Greens, Secretary General, and every single person of our staffs in Austria and in the EGP office for organizing this fantastic Congress. Thanks a lot. Yes. Yes, it's worth an applause. Before I will come to the point of enlargement of the Green family, but also about our strategies and the Spitzenkandidates that we will decide on, let me reflect a bit on what has happened. We're now 1 year before the elections to 2024 European Parliament elections. And I mean, where have we started? Last elections were the biggest success the Green family ever had in European elections. In 2019, we managed, together with all that mobilization, that climate movement, Fridays for Future, mainly the youth, but also big parts of society, this mobilization, together with us Greens as politicians that defend green policies since decades, together we managed to get a lot of power on the streets and a lot of votes into the parliaments. It led many of our Green parties into governments. We have colleagues that serve as ministers, environment, energy, infrastructure, but also foreign ministry, justice, social affairs, arts, culture. It's a very broad picture that our ministers are covering today. So it has brought us into a situation where we are part of the decision making. And I want to say this movement also in 2019 was a huge political power, and this huge political power we are still carrying on. So if something, the green wave is over, I would say wrong. It's still rolling, it's still rolling. So it even led to a conservative commission president and a commission that is not really built of green politicians, to accept the scientific realities, to accept the needs that need to be delivered to the citizens, to accept that there is a need for a green transition, and the Commission was bringing forward the Green Deal. And this was the result of civil society, of Fridays for Future, of all that mobilization, so that was great. And we could say, well, fantastic. This is the most progressive kind of policy we have across the globe. If we listen to science, we also know, well, we still got to go a bit further. But what we see in the moment is a major attack on the Green Deal. It's a major attack. And I mean, okay, surprise. I mean, some of the biggest companies in the world are based on fossil fuels. And who of you expected them to just play along and say, okay, we understand, our time's over, we're going extinct now, you know? Who of you expected them to just silently play along? I think none of us. But now they're fighting back in a way that is really harsh. They're using the illegal invasion of Russia into the Ukrainian soil. They're using the warmongering of authoritarian regimes. They are using the warmongering of authoritarian regimes that are financing themselves with our dependency on fossil fuels. And they are using this situation to try to kill the Green Deal wherever possible, to reinvent industrial agriculture, to re-strengthen the use of fossil fuels, gas or oil, or you name it, whatever it is. And this attack is severe. We will talk more about that also in the next panel. This attack is not an attack on the Greens. It's an attack on future-proof policies for us and mainly for the next generations. This is the attack that we're seeing. And unfortunately, it is, again, right-wingers, well, no surprise from that side, but what the surprise is that more and more conservatives are joining this club and have decided to fight the Green Deal in all its dimensions, together with post-fascist parties, together with post-Nazi parties, together with extreme right, spreading fake news, spreading wrong information, creating narratives that give a totally wrong impression to citizens. Just to give you an example, they were spreading the EU wants to stop Austria using biomass. Well, the opposite is true. They're spreading, well, every household will have to renovate its house within 2 years and it's all going to put us in debt. It's wrong. The European Union is allocating billions of euros to support the transition. And the nation states, especially where Greens are co-governing, are allocating billions of euros to help society in the transition. And clearly, this has to be at the core of our policy. We have to acknowledge that there is parts of society for whom it is hard to invest, for whom it is hard to pay higher energy prices, for whom it is hard to cope with the transition. And we have to make sure that, first of all, we make those pay that have most emissions, so let's look at the wealthy ones. We have to make sure that also companies and multinational companies pay their fair share of taxes and do the fair share of reducing their CO2 emissions. And if we have a fair play here, we can also demand it from citizens to play along and to also take parts of the investments, parts of the transition, and to also ask themselves, what can I myself contribute? So, Green Deal is ambitious. It's going into the right direction, and the fossil fuel industry is fighting back. But we're many, and we're strong. We're civil society. We have science on our side. We have reasonable politicians that work based on facts, that deliver concrete solutions and not polarizing narratives that split society. We're trying to keep people together, to have a united effort and a united struggle to deliver future-proof policies for the next generations. And so it's all of us together that stand against this attack of fossil industry. The fossil dinosaur industry and their lobbies attack the Green Deal. All I say, and this in the run-up to European elections 2024, and all I tell them now today is, let them come, let's pick up the battle, let's win these European elections, let's show them what future-proof policies look like with this welcome to our 27th EGP Congress here in Vienna.
Yes, a big round of applause for Thomas Weitz, and it's the 37th Congress. It's 10 years later. Thank you very much. And you can keep the applause going on for our next speech, which will motivate us. I'm really glad about having her here. It's the Federal Minister of Justice. It's Alma Sadic. Wow.
I need my Spickzettel, and I'm not as eloquent as Tom Weitz is. I need a speech in order to make sure I say all of that I want to say. Dear colleagues, welcome to Vienna. It's an incredible pleasure to have you all here at the 37th European Green Party Congress. And it's great that we are meeting today, a year ahead of the elections, that we meet and exchange our views, exchange and discuss the common challenges, the challenges that we share all over Europe. And yes, the times are tough. As we all know, the world is an extremely difficult place right now, and we are facing multiple crises. Although the pandemic and its weight that shaped our daily lives is fortunately receded, COVID-19 has left its marks. Because it has tested our resilience. It has tested the resilience of our European Union. It has tested the resilience of our democratic institutions. And more of all, it has also tested the resilience of our solidarity. And in the midst of all of that, no one of us will forget the 24th February 2022. A day that will be remembered by all of us. This fateful morning, and the shock and the disbelief when Putin, with his blatant breach of international law, struck in Ukraine. It's an ongoing war of aggression of Putin that still holds grip of Europe and the rest of the world. And of course, the European answer so far has been strong, has been united, and in full respect of our rule-based order. It's also in full respect of the solidarity for the Ukrainian people and their fight for freedom, their fight for democracy, and their fight for peace, because it's also our own struggle. It's our own struggle for a free, democratic, and peaceful Europe, and we need to stand behind Ukraine. And this war has reminded us that our peace and our sense of security is vulnerable. It has reminded us that we need to strengthen the rule of law, that we need to strengthen human rights, and that we need to strengthen our democracies all over Europe. And one thing that is so important, and more important than ever, we need, in solidarity all over Europe, we need to show that the law of power will never be able to replace the rule of law that we so long fought for. And if we mention rule of law, we all know that this also means holding Putin and all of those responsible for these horrendous crimes in Ukraine, holding them responsible, bringing them to justice, because there will be no peace without justice. And this war, unfortunately, has brought forward another aspect which we Greens have so many times pointed out. So many times we have shown that our dependence on Russian gas, our dependence on fossil fuels is dangerous. It's dangerous for Europe, and it's dangerous for our own living, because what we see now is that we have increasing costs of living because the gas prices are skyrocketing. And we see that because of that, inequality is growing. European citizens, because of that, struggle to meet ends meet. And this is a wake-up call. It's a wake-up call for everyone. It's a wake-up call to show that all our solutions, our green solutions, our green answers had been the right ones. And it's now more than ever that we need this desperate change. We need climate justice, and we need to get rid of fossil fuels. And yes, we have been doing extremely important work, all of you. Be it in parliaments, be it in governments, be it as activists, all of you have done an amazing job doing extremely important work during these difficult times, putting climate and social justice, putting solidarity, peace, and democracy at the very center of your agenda. At the very center of our all agendas, because with all of that in mind, we have been shaping national, EU, and global policies. And we do need to continue to do that. And as a Minister of Justice, I cannot leave this podium to point out one important aspect, something that is very dear and close to my heart, and this is our democracy. As Minister of Justice, and I am now Minister of Justice for the last 3.5 years, it becomes clear to me that Europe also needs a comprehensive green justice and home affairs policy. It needs a justice and home affairs policy that is green and that is just and that is focusing on strengthening the rule of law and strengthening our democracy. We need democracy, rule of law, more than ever. Because this war has painfully reminded us that we need to strengthen our global alliances with all of these countries and like-minded democratic partners. We need to intensify our joint efforts for democratization all over Europe, but also all over the world, our support for civil societies, our support for youth activists, for human rights and environmental defenders, for journalists. We need to strengthen our support also for the independent media. We need to put human rights at the center of our actions. And this reminds me of one thing. We should not forget that our European family is definitely not complete without the Western Balkans. And I need to mention that now. And I need to mention that now because I've been yesterday at the Central European Roundtable, and it's so important to strengthen our partners in the Western Balkans, because I know their path towards the European Union is going to be a long one, but we need to support them. We need to support a civil society in the Western Balkans to help them, try to make them as strong as they can be against all these corrupt leaders in their respective countries, to make them finally change what is necessary to be changed, to enter the European Union. And of course, speaking of democracy and the rule of law, we also need to strengthen democracy and the rule of law in our own respective countries. And in particular, when it comes to the effective fight of corruption. And I'm not saying it just like this, I'm also saying that because of our own personal experience in Austria. Some of you are familiar probably with Austrian politics over the last 3 years, and all of you know probably that we now have the third chancellor, because the first one stepped back because of corruption allegations. So we had corruption allegations at the core of our policies. And why is corruption so dangerous? Corruption is incredibly dangerous because it erodes the trust of the people. It erodes the trust of the people in our democracy. People, in particular young people, are turning away from democracies. If you look at the polls from Germany of young people, many of them don't believe in democracies anymore. And this is a wake-up call for us all. We need to strengthen this trust, and that's why we need to fight this terrible corruption all over Europe, because we want people to trust in our democracies, to trust in politicians, to trust into media, and to trust in our world order. As Greens, we are committed to build a Europe that delivers to its citizens. And Europe that needs a solid rule of law mechanism and anti-corruption mechanism, which will allow the democracies to thrive, rule of law to thrive, and human rights to thrive. And that's why I believe that this conditionality mechanism on a European level is incredibly crucial, because it will force those who are eroding rule of law in Europe to stick to rule of law, to adhere to rule of law, because that's incredibly important. Conditionality on a European level, it's incredibly important to force those national regimes, those those populists, to finally stick to rule of law. And yes, we Greens, we need to shape our European future. We need to remember that the birth of the European Union was a great historic achievement, a stabilizing factor that reconciled a war-torn continent, and that managed that for the first time in history, we lived in peace, prosperity, and stability for such a long time. We should never forget that. We should make our Europe stronger and try to make Europe the best version of itself. A free, democratic, and peaceful Europe. And when it comes to all of that, dear green friends, our European green family, you are the change makers. We together are those that can change Europe and that can drive the change necessary for the future. You are the change makers of tomorrow, and let's rock that for the next elections. Thank you very much.
Thank you for this strong and important speech of social justice and democracy. Alma Sadic, thanks. And last but not least, we have the federal spokesperson of the Grünen, the Green Party of Austria, the Vice Chancellor and the Minister for Culture, Arts, Civil Services and Sports on stage. It's Werner Kogler. It's your time.
It works. So, welcome to Vienna, my green friends and colleagues. I'm pleased to be able to welcome you all to Austria. Strong Greens in Europe are more important today than ever before, because the collapse of our planet's climate is not a fate. Let's accept the challenge and take up the chance that lies in economic transformation away from the age of fossil fuels towards a modern, ecological era of renewable energies. For a socially just and a secure green future for our children that will preserve our planet, because, as we know, there's no planet B. In the coming year, we will once again fight for the necessary majorities in the European Parliament in order to take in this important task. As you may know, as Greens, we have been through a dramatic time here in Austria, because in 2017 we dropped out of the Parliament. But after a substantive process, we were able to reposition ourselves as a party of ecology and justice. This we managed to do in 2019. Our motto back then, come back stronger. And we had the biggest election success in our party's history. This allowed us to start government negotiations with a rather difficult, we heard, a right-wing conservative coalition. But the alternative would have been for a far-right, so-called Freedom Party to once again assume a role in government. In the coalition negotiations, we were able to ensure that some substantial election promises relating to the climate protection and social justice were included in the government program. Now we have been in government for more than 3 years, and despite crises and new challenges every day, we have achieved a lot in terms of environmental and climate protection, in terms of justice and transparency. Already in the run-up to the parliamentary elections, we were able to give a strong sign of life during the European election campaign. And today, I finally have the opportunity to express my thanks to the European Green Movement, the European Green Party, and the Green Group in the European Parliament. Almost 5 years ago, the European Green Party and the group in Parliament greatly supported our political comeback in the Republic of Austria. From a position of extra parliamentary opposition, first to the European Parliament and then back to Austria's national parliament, directly into government. But your substantive and personal support were outstanding and brought us back onto the political stage in Austria. Thank you for this, Skarkeller. Thank you for this Bas Eickhout, and thank you Philippe Lambert, and thank you Wula. Where is she? Wula? Ah. And thank you also Michel Raymond, Sarah Wiener, Moni Warner, and Tom Weitz, who strengthened us through the Green Group at the time. And back then, I truly felt the meaning of international support, solidarity, the benefits of cooperation with politically like-minded people, and being part of a pan-European movement. I would also like to expressly thank our German friends, especially Robert Habeck, who supported us during both election campaigns, and Annalena Baerbock, with whom I had the opportunity to prepare the next steps in climate protection policy at the 2018 United Nations Climate Change Conference in Katowice. Thank you all for this support at that time. And thank you all for coming to Vienna today in order to tackle the next challenges facing us. The threats to our economies and energy supply systems arising from Putin's war and the looming consequences for the European and global security order, which is the reason why we must have leave behind the age of fossil fuels and move towards my paper is wrong. Move towards a solar future. Energy independence will guarantee security, freedom, and sustainability. And the ever-worsening climate and environmental crisis and the crisis of biodiversity, we are all aware of the struggle to reduce global warming. The worsening food crisis around the globe and the humanitarian crisis happening on the ground and for millions of displaced people. We must not leave ourselves, we must not let ourselves be overwhelmed by reality. We have to face it head on and gather our strength to make a stand against it, united. Because our opponents, the climate change deniers, the friends of Putin, they are all gathering to form a new phalanx. They are promising people heaven on earth, but what we get is oil catastrophes and greenhouse gas emissions that could finally cause our climate to pass the tipping points. Let's not forget, our task is also to deprive the far right, which likes to feed into people's fears by offering simply slogans and wrong answers. Not only by providing the better argument, but also by explaining our objectives in an understandable way. The right only caters to backward sentiments. Confronting the right means proving that even and especially in times of crisis, there are political options for the future other than authoritarian solutions and that we cannot beam ourselves back into the past. We cannot escape current developments on the world. We can, however, shape our future to be one of a transformation instead of depression. Steering in difficult times is our motto. We cannot know today when and how Russia's war against Ukraine will end, but we can support Ukraine with all means possible so that the dream of freedom and democracy can become a reality for this part of Europe as well. As Greens, we can push for the implementation of renewable energies and economic transformation, modernize jobs and fight for social justice. Not one else but us will do this. In the course of the pandemic, we have learned again that unregulated global trade not only shows us the limits of growth, but also the limits of supply chains and the exploitation of raw material and so on. So we need to set the course in the EU for a path of sustainability and economic independence, also in such a way that migration, for example, can be seen as a positive and important element for the labor markets of the future. And we can become independent, and we can and we must.
That we can, in order to become the prime minister parties one day. So we have the tools, now we need the political will. We can have the legislation, the climate acts, we can have less subsidies for fossil industries and fuels, and more subsidies for the people who are doing the least well off in these societies. May it be energiegeld kind of instruments, or may it be basic income, or all of these questions that we've always had on the agenda. I think we have to push those even more and even harder. Because I even know that I'm not sure about the other countries' basic income discussion, but back home it's quite hard for the social democratic movement, which is coming into this field quite strongly regarding climate policies, environmental policies, but they are not being able to see the need for renewing the whole social security system in order to answer tomorrow's crisis better. And we have that tool already. May it be basic income or something else, but we have the mindset of renewing things, and we just need to be brave on these things. Thank you.
Thank you, Leonora and Maria. Thank you, Maria, also for touching already upon also the questions of social implications, implementation. What we see is that as long as climate policy was an abstract call to the high institutions, we saw 80% of support in society. But then in the moment, when it comes to direct impacts to citizens' life, like a call of change of consumption, a call to change your travel patterns, to change your windows back home, to get some insulation, then the support substantially drops. And we also see big parts of society that are still employed in the old fossil industry, and also those want to hear answers and need to be taken with us. And for this, I would like to raise this question to you, Michael. You're leading a think tank that is working on the transition, on the needed transition, but you're also a sociologist. So you also have this background on impact on society. And I think one of the magic questions that I'm asking myself, and we're debating a lot, is how do we manage to take citizens along with us in this transformation? Please, take the floor.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for interesting speeches and comments before. I think we have to understand the current transition which is happening and understand what is going on, what are successes, but also what is not working so far. So if we look, for example, at reports of international energy agencies, there is a lot to be happy about. We see enormous additions in solar energy in Europe, in Poland, around the world, especially in China. With wind power in Europe, the situation was a bit challenging last year. We had supply chain issues, we had economic uncertainty, but now the governments are recognizing the barriers, permitting process, grid development. So we're seeing that these topics are somehow being addressed. And also we even see that next steps, so the flexibility of the power system, which is the main challenge later on, especially in the countries like Poland, like Germany, that doesn't have large-scale hydropower, which can balance the renewables. So this is a huge challenge, and we see the technological innovation and also regulatory approach that is trying to tackle those issues. So a lot is going on, the electric cars are going on, but if everything is so fine, why perhaps here to be 100% happy? And this is because I think that we have to recognize that this transition is still happening mostly inside the logic of the system, and I think this is like a very complex situation, like two-level situation. We, the climate coalition, you as Greens, are insiders. We all know that we can't afford to wait outside. We can't afford to like socioeconomic contradiction solve themselves, because the climate and environment doesn't have that much time. So we engage in policy. Some of our friends engage in green business. We use the narratives that work at the moment. So we use the narratives of green growth, and we actually quite commonly talk to the people like everything will be a bit as usual, but with the green technologies. And for example, the electric vehicles, yes? There is nothing like more business as usual as individual personal electric car. Yeah? It's business as usual, but a bit more green. So even on that level, we see the pushbacks. We see the pushbacks from interest groups, especially the lobbies, fossil fuel lobbies, although at the moment they very much want to join in the transition. So that's also an important factor. In Poland, even state-owned coal-related companies are now trying to ditch the coal power plants, ditch the responsibility, and then, for example, they won all of the licenses for offshore wind in currently distributed round. So they want to make the transition. The second part, of course, of the pushback is the groups that will really be affected. They are in some places larger, in some places smaller. In Poland, this is mostly a problem in like medium-sized cities that were 100% dependent on the fossil fuel industry, like Bełchatów, for example. To smaller extent in Silesian region, which is at the moment largest coal mining region in Europe, but is also a very huge, heavily urbanized region with quite diverse economy, industry. So a lot of alternatives are going on. The third element of the pushback is fake news, yeah, as we can see with electric cars, with heat pumps. Like, just people will have their comforts, but because they are affected by the narratives, they don't believe that. I think those three pushbacks, they can be like challenged, they can be persuaded, and we are working on it, but we also have to understand that this is still being inside this logic, because, and this is why we need the Greens and climate coalition, because all of that I was talking before, like the very responsible economic policies that will bring low energy prices in 10 years, center-right with scientific knowledge can do that. But we are not only insiders, we are also outsiders, because we understand the limitation of that approach, because the transition is now gaining momentum, but the processes that we see are not enough to achieve 1.5 degree, and they are probably not enough to achieve the heating of 2 or less degrees. So this is why I think it's very important for the social movements, for the green parties to work inside the system, but also like plant the seeds for the future changes that have to be done. Because if we see at those problems, we often see that the crisis is not like limited to the energy, but is broader. And like to finish up about this truly affected group, the coal miners. Actually, in Silesian region, for example, because the transition will be gradual, a lot of coal miners will just age out of the workforce, working in their places. Some of them will receive a support because they have quite also that's. But they have quite significant political impact. But the thing that they are concerned about are their children, because their children won't find the work that will pay so much, and especially won't find the work that will bring the same levels of dignity, of sense of community, of being like an active part, because the labor unions are active in public sector, they are active in the mines, but they are almost non-existent in special economic zones that are alternative for the next generation. So I think this is just one of the cases when we see that we have to go beyond the contradictions towards the economy that has good jobs, but also like real social impact and sense of being an active actor in your life, to ensure that we have more and more people on board, to not just get low prices in 10 years, but also to avoid the climate collapse in 20.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Michael. Thanks a lot. At this point, and I'm aware we're running late already a bit, but at this point I would like to involve all of you here, because the question is also how far are we as persons, as individuals, how far are we ready to go with the consequences that we take and that we're ready to also take and implement. How much are we ready to change also in our lives? And for this, I would like to invite you to join an exercise and to turn to the person sitting next to you, and we just take 2 minutes each to turn to the person next to you, most preferably not the person you know very well, but I mean, if this is the only option you have, please take the person next to you and exchange just for 2 minutes and tell each other how far are you personally ready to go, and then we pick some of your answers. Yes? Okay, 1, 2, 3, go.
I would like, actually, because I don't have very strong character, I would like to support the policies that would like make me do a lot of things.
Yeah.
So I'm
Exactly.
that kind of person.
Yeah, but we talked a lot now about the role of commission, the role of ministers, the political role, the implementation, how to, yeah. But there's also an individual aspect to this, yeah. It's both. Yeah? It's neither only this nor only that. Yeah?
to open for the audience to talk right after this?
Yes, yes.
We're going to take the microphones if they have questions. Are they
Tomorrow is my last day, actually.
Okay, okay. Okay. There's a lot to exchange, absolutely. So I want to thank you for participating in this exercise. I think we would need much more time to actually go into depth. So if you may do me the favor, please come back with your attention. Okay, I think I unleashed the needed debate here. So, colleagues, colleagues, thank you. Thanks very much. Is there somebody who likes to share with us? We have some microphones left and right. Is there someone who likes to share what has just happened between you and the person you're talking to? Is there someone who likes to share? Colleagues, friends, give me a chance to regain your attention, please. Thank you. So is there somebody who likes to share with us what you have just exchanged and where the obstacles are? Yes, please. One microphone here to the center, to Eva. Yes, please, Eva.
Hi, so I'm Eva from Poland, and I'm 65, and I was speaking to a girl from Sweden who must be the age 20. So it's 2 generations and of women, and what is very interesting that we have exactly the same things that are easy. That means food. We are eating already vegetarian, vegan, organic, as much as possible. So this is easy. We have not many difficulties for clothes. We are exchanging a lot of clothes. We don't travel by plane when it's not absolutely necessary. So for traveling, we are choosing public transportation and the train. So this is something that is easy. There is one thing that is impossible. It's this.
The cell phones, yes. Handies.
This is impossible. And when I'm 65 and I'm already addicted and impossible to... So what about 20 years old person?
Thank you, Eva. Yes, applause. It would be wonderful to pick a second person that would like to share with us, somebody else that would like to share the conversation that you just had with your partner next to each other. Somebody brave? Huh? Okay, then let's move on, because basically we talked a lot about the political responsibilities and what we can do as politically elected people and how we have to set and create the right environment, the legal structures. But I think it's a twofold responsibility. And so one side, the responsibility of lawmakers of setting the right conditions that allow transition and to organize the transition, but also we have to find ways of taking people along with us also and also to deliver their share of changing behaviors and going climate friendly and environmental friendly. So thanks a lot for doing this exercise. And now coming back to our podium here, I would very much appreciate if we can do a short round on what are your experiences on where does the actual resistance come from and how does it come? So towards Virginius, how much are you actually talking to citizens, to civil society, and how much influence and how much access to the Commission and or to your office fossil fuel lobbyists or people have that defend the interests and maybe even a legitimate interest of a certain industry that should rather be on the brink of extinction than keep on running their business interests. And I will not repeat the question, but then also towards our two ministers, Leonora and Maria, what is your experience? Where is the actual counteraction coming from, and how do you deal with that? Please, Commissioner.
Yes. Thank you very much for such a great panel and this great exchange. And you know, speaking about the access, I think in Commission we have quite well-established rules of who can meet and the processes. And I wouldn't say that you feel this very much kind of pressure from the stakeholders at the Commissioner level. I'm pretty sure on services level it's slightly different, but overall, if you look, the decision-making in the EU is not that easy. You know, you still, Commission puts a proposal, then you have Parliament's opinion, Council opinion, which then has to land into some end result. But I think the problem is much bigger than just the decision-making on the political level. The lady just showed us a mobile phone, and we have to realize in which era we live. Today, you can be a climate scientist working on climate issues for 20 years. You put a tweet out, and you can be a poor populist who doesn't understand a thing about the climate, and you put the tweet out, and your word and the scientist's word is equals the same. Even if you get more likes, your word will mean more than scientist's word. So this is the era in which we live, with all its greatness and the dangers. And therefore, you know, we see that, you know, society is extremely split on many of the arguments, because I guess if you take my phone and one of the guest's phone and you scroll, you would see completely different, you know, answers to the same questions being answered. And, you know, I take it as, you know, walking into a timber, and you go into deeper, or you cannot get back. So this is a huge complication, and that's why I think it's extremely important to have a critical voices across society. Because one thing is, you know, this guy with the gray or blue suit with the tie talking from the podium, and completely different is society, scientists being approachable, talking, you know, young people, explaining things in a way that it could be applicable. We will all do our role. I think we, as I said, we don't need to, you know, this convincing, but what we really need is to reach a way broader society, to explain it in more simple terms. And I think, you know, 2019, 2018, those climate movements, they were critical, because you can be, I don't know, somewhere in the outskirts of Europe, not caring about the politics at all, but you could not ignore that, you know, there is always, you know, all press filled with these young people marching, asking for something, so you are forced to really look what's going on. And for example, with biodiversity, we are far away from being here. And then you have these, you know, riders of apocalypse saying that, you know, our food security is endangered because of the nature restoration legislation. Come on. I mean, our food security is endangered because our soils are losing fertility, because there is not enough water for the agricultural sector. Our food is endangered because we're just losing ecosystems, and there is no technology that's going to replace it.
Mayor, you want to share with us your opinion?
Yes, thank you. We had a common answer here to your first question, and it was the systemic change. And then you actually rephrased it later on. You said exactly what we were talking here, that we cannot push the responsibility for the individual shoulders. We, as politicians, have to show that we have the solutions. Because this is one of the biggest backlashes and opposing opinions, that, okay, you weren't enough green yourself, you were drinking Coke or eating meat sometimes, that's why you are a bad person or not saving the world. Because we have to show that we need politics, we need systematic changes in everything, how we move, how we build, how we do our agriculture. everything. And I think the resistance probably comes quite a lot also from those sectors that actually know what has to be done, but they haven't done it already like decades ago. And now it's like they are exactly too far somewhere, and maybe we should try to team up with them somehow to show the forest industry and agriculture sector that we have the solutions and we can do this together. Let's make it more sustainable. Of course, we've been trying it for a long time, but let's probably try again and more that explanation, and that because we are now like too far from each other, and they probably feel like they have, or I think personally, it's not the farmers, but it's the lobbyists, the institutions that should have been supporting these farmers for decades ago to do it more sustainably.
You want to come in on this, Leonore?
Could come in on a lot of things now from this very rich debate, but I want to pick up on two things. You asked the question, where does the resistance come from? I think a lot of truth is in what you said last. There is a big difference between what individual companies, individual farmers, and individual representatives do and what their representations say. So I think there is a big gap in that. In many countries, at least I can say there is. It's like that in Austria. So of course, the resistance against my policies is well documented. So I can share a library of that, but I will not go into that. I think the question is not to dwell in the resistance, but to say how can we overcome it. And I want to just share two thoughts. The one, and they were mentioned. It's actually the proof is in the pudding, and the second is we need to talk much more about it. And we see a lot in the whole discussion about the heating systems, for example, the heating system change. Yeah? We see a lot of fears being exploited by populists. Every fear you can have about your house being less worth, being cold, you can, whatever, you cannot afford it is exploited. So you have the absurd situation that you have those people who profit from keeping people in fossil dependency now being the best class warriors. They are the ones defending social justice, suddenly, which is simply not true. I mean, this is simply a pretension, but we need to prove them wrong. So what did we do in Austria? Because there's also an answer to that. We said, okay, if we do a subsidy for heating exchange, then the lowest 20% of the income bracket, they get the heating system paid up to 100%. So they just get their heating system. And thanks to all the people from parliament back there who fought with me on that. But we need to also do the policy in the way that we prove we are the ones who think together social justice and climate justice. And the second thing, and I cannot underline it more often, what Virginia said and what you also said, Maria, and you also said, I think we all said it, we need to go out and talk about this in very concrete terms, very much related to what it means for people's lives in terms of what we can win from it. Why are we doing that? Because climate action is for the many, not for the few. It's not the few rich people who they will always pay their way out. If you have your holiday home on the lakeside and your alpine resort somewhere, you will not have a problem with that crisis that you were describing. You get on your helicopter and you're away. No, what we are doing is for the many people in our countries to give them a better quality of life, and I think this is what we need to describe in much more concrete terms. As ministers, we've tried to do one contribution to this Congress in this by working on the Vienna Declaration with what we want to do, how we want to push very concrete change over the next years in the governments to advance a just energy transition. So check it out. But I think I love to talk to you, but it's much more important that you don't talk to me, but to many other people outside of this room.
Let me come back to you, Michael. You have heard the comparison that the commissioner gave. Well, if you're sending out a tweet as a scientist, you know, with like fact-based information, you're competing on the market with people that basically polarize and popularize, and then maybe get more hits like you do. What would you kind of give us Greens on the way as a recommendation, but also demand? How can we more amplify? How can we strengthen the cooperation? Where can we just get better in kind of strengthening the ties and making it a common effort?
I think we should recognize that we are just one part of the coalition. We, for example, as a small, relatively small non-governmental organization, analytical and research center, we are cooperating with social movements, we are cooperating with the media, but we are also going to the places that perhaps are like not to the industry conferences, to even some conferences that are connected and are attended by fossil fuels, because we just want to push whenever we can, and we try to also discuss with all kinds of political parties, although of course some of them are much more happy to exchange views and gather the expertise. So I think we have to recognize the different social actors, and we are, for example, cooperating on starting cooperation even with like popular figures like YouTubers and people like that, supplying them with knowledge, with information. And to work like that, and this is also a bit of how to make that possible, one important thing, like a bit technical but important, is the transparency of the governance. We, for example, all the time encounter the lack of data, that data is not published, analysis of, for example, more ambitious decarbonization scenarios are not conducted by institutions or are not published, and we are hitting this wall. I have colleagues that like full-time are working to get the data out of the public institutions, and I think it's very important because that's a tool not just to not just rely on the government narrative when the more progressive elements are in government, but also to empower other social actors to create their own narrative, for example, to empower NGOs to use the data to, for example, counter the narratives of like quite often very established figures, because if we talk about environment, we talk about especially transition away from fossil fuels, about the power sector, we quite commonly have on the other side established experts with like 3 or 4 decades of experience. And of course, they are a bit conservative. They have their whole career was connected to the fossil fuels, so I can understand when they are coming from. But I need the tools to counter the narrative. So publicizing data, strategies, analysis, models is also very important.
Thank you, Michael. Thank you. Yes, thank you. And as we are running late, I would say I would give the last intervention to Benedetta. And my question is, I mean, we're all intending to win these European elections once again and to keep the green wave rolling. Well, we will, yes, exactly. And I think we will only manage if we join forces from science, from our people in the ministries, from the Commission, but basically with civil society and with the youth movement again. And this is quite a job to manage. Benedetta, what is your take on your impression or your recommendation also? What do we all have to take care for? What do we have to look at? What is needed to keep this link between green politics, green politicians, and the climate movement alive, fertile, and delivering?
Thank you. So first of all, I believe we need to recognize that the climate movement has changed a lot from 2019. So I don't know if you noticed, but there's not many streets and squares so full, but there's other kind of actions. So there's smaller actions, and there's like more visible action somehow. They're trying to really make a point. So they changed their strategy, but they also changed their numbers. So there's one thing that I think it needs to be stressed, is that many young people are completely disillusioned. And I talked to many young people that told me there's nothing to do, it's too late, we're done. period in history where the youth is less hopeful than the older generation, which I think is one of the most scariest things that we could encounter, because without a push from the youth, change historically has never happened. So we should really make that into a thing. So how to make that into a thing? I think first, like this collaboration with youth organizations, youth political organizations is extremely important. All the work that we are doing, that other organizations are doing, should be recognized. And when I say recognize, means that these people should be put into the decision-making processes. I think we should stop saying, let's do what the youth wants, and we should start doing what the youth wants because the youth wants to be there. The youth wants to be in this decision-making and doesn't want to be acknowledged, doesn't want to be notified when the decisions are taken. So this is extremely important. I'm saying this to the ministers, to the commissioner, to all the politicians here. First, let's put the youth where the decisions are taken. Second, let's candidate youth. Third, let's take young people seriously. They know what they're talking about. We know what we're talking about. We are very prepared. We are very skilled on this. So let's take us seriously. And this would really help the collaboration. And second, I think it's inevitable that the Green parties take some compromises, especially when they go to government, when they go to higher level of decision making. This is not something that people would not understand, that the climate movements would not understand. What they do not understand is that why there's not conversation about it. Why we're not going there and report back and say this has happened. Why do I need to have this very political communication? That was the best thing to do. It wasn't the best thing to do. It was the only thing that you could do. Okay, but tell me this and tell me in my face. So I think that's how you keep relationship. And finally, and this is an appeal for all of you, please, 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 let's fight until the last of our energy to not let far right win any election, because they will stop the freedom. They're already stopping people from protesting. In Italy, they're criminalizing the climate movement. They're giving the climate movement like they're eco-vandalists. They're giving the climate movement like they are the fault of everything. Please, this will kill the movement, but this will kill the climate action. So let's do anything in our power to stop the far right.
And this is exactly what we're going to do, together with science, together with the youth movements, together with our political allies, wherever we find them, together with all of you here, no matter in what function you are, no matter whether you're in governments or opposition, no matter what age you are or where you are belonging to or belonging from. All together, we will manage to run these 2024 elections again into a green wave success. I thank you all very much for participating here. Me personally, I could run this conversation in another 2 hours. It wouldn't get boring. I would have a lot more interesting questions, and I'm sure there would be a lot of more stuff we could pick your brains on. Thanks a lot for joining this conversation.